Hey, I was just going down memory lane again and thinking about some things that happened to me early on in my experience with God and in life itself. And I was thinking about the times, all the many times that God has shown me mercy and came to my aid and deliverance. When I could have died, I could have passed away at a young age, like most of us. We look back on our childhood, our teenage years, and our young adult life, and we are amazed that we survived. And I know that you are in, same as me in that respect. But I got saved when I was 12 years old, and that began a new life for me in terms of uh, coming to know the Lord and experiencing the Lord in my life. And I had many experiences as a young teenager that demonstrated to me that I was not alone, that God was with me, and God had mercy on me. And some of these experiences involved automobiles. When I was 16 years old, on my 16th birthday, in fact, I got down to the Texas Department of Public Safety headquarters and took my driving test and made 100% on the written and 100% on the driving test, and got my driver's license on that day. And that began a different kind of adventure in my life, and that was me learning how to maintain my automobile in the road and keeping it from accidents, which I was not all that great at, but God was with me. And I remember one particular occasion that happened right after I got my license. I was going to church on a Sunday night at South Lawn Assembly of God Church, 4300 South Bowie, for our youth meeting. Our youth meeting started at 6 o'clock. I was by myself and driving along the Canyon Expressway, which is now called I-27, but we all knew it as the Canyon Expressway. And there was a giant curve in the road where the expressway went down underneath an overpass. I believe it was on Taylor or Tyler Street overpass. And as I was approaching that going down under there, and as you went into there, you made a big curve. And I was approaching that particular location, and all of a sudden I just had this great urge, and it's like a voice inside of me saying, "Exit now." And right there was the exit, the last exit before you went underneath those roads that went over the overpass. And so I just went off into that exit ramp and came to a stop there at Taylor or Tyler Street. And as I was sitting there at that stop sign, wondering why did I do this, I heard these loud crashes down below in the on the freeway. And when I looked down there, there had been this tremendous accident where an off-duty police officer was driving a souped-up Studebaker, and he was going around that curve at a high rate of speed and had a blowout, and his car flipped over and went over the median and smashed the tops of 4 or 5 other cars that were going the other direction. And right at the precise moment that I would have been there. And there were several people killed. The driver of the Studebaker was killed, and then several of the occupants in other cars. And later on, when we saw the pictures in the newspaper, these cars were just flattened like some big giant had just stepped on them. But fortunately, and to God's glory, I was not there. And that was a tremendous lesson to me in the importance of listening to the voice of the Holy Spirit. He saved my life that day. And from that point on, I began to realize the Holy Spirit is not just a thing or an it or a religious dogma, but the Holy Spirit is the person of God that is resident in me to help me when I need help. And that night I needed help, and he came to my rescue. And I've often wondered, if I would be of a mind or of a spiritual condition today to hear that same voice, or would I be, because I'm such an experienced driver after all these years, would I be so self-sufficient and egotistical that I couldn't take instructions from the Lord? I don't know, but I hope and pray that I would be that alert and that sensitive and quick to obey the Holy Spirit. And I'm amazed that I was when I was only 16 years old. It just boggles my mind to think about that. And but that's one of the times where the Lord showed me great mercy and preserved my life. And then the very next year, when I was 17, I was a senior in high school, and the Oral Roberts University had a seniors day or seniors weekend at the campus where they would bring seniors in from all over the country and show them the university and try to recruit them to attend Oral Roberts University. And I always had an affection for Oral Roberts and Oral Roberts University. And so I arranged to go. I accepted their invitation, and I didn't have any money, but all we had to do was get there, and they would put us up and feed us and take care of us while we were there. So really all I needed was the gas money to drive to Tulsa and drive home. And so this was over the Easter weekend. So on Good Friday morning, I got up real early and left the house about 6 o'clock that morning in my 1961 Mercury Comet, which was a lightweight vehicle that my dad allowed me to take off of his car lot and use. And so as I was driving away, I remember seeing my mother in the doorway. We had a storm door, and she's standing behind the window of the storm door and waving at me. And I drove away about 6 o'clock that Good Friday morning. This was 1967, and I had no uneventful drive, and I drove for 3 hours, and I was just outside of Weatherford, Oklahoma. There was a light drizzle, nothing spectacular, just a light rain. I was driving along about 60 miles an hour, and I came behind a Volkswagen Beetle that was just loaded to the gills with, I guess, everything that couple owned. He was in the military, and he was being transferred, and so he was moving his wife, and he were going to their next station, and that Volkswagen was loaded down with all their worldly goods. And I saw it, and it's on the Interstate 40, flat road, straight road, just this light drizzle. And so I went around this Volkswagen. He was going slower than I was, and so I passed him, but I passed him very slowly, gently, deliberately, with my turn signals and everything, and really without accelerating. He must have been going 50, and I was going 60. But as I was pulling back into the right lane in front of him, I had a blowout on the right front, and just the pressure of the blowout on the right front caused that front wheel to just buckle underneath and collapse. And next thing I knew, I'm rolling over and flying through the air upside down and saying, "Jesus, help." And that was before seat belts, so I was being tossed around inside the car. And I remember distinctly the car going over the median upside down and hitting the westbound lanes of Interstate 40 on its roof, and I could feel the scraping of the highway just on the other side of the roof, which was one little piece of tin. And I'm laying on it, but I could feel the road scraping on the other side. And the car went all the way across and slammed into a pile of sand that a work crew had left there. And beyond that pile of sand was a drop-off in a deep culvert, maybe 25, 30 feet. I would have fallen if it hadn't been for that mound of dirt. And the car came to a halt, and one of the doors had come open on the passenger side. And so I slipped out this tiny little opening and stood up, and the car was upside down. The engine steam was rising because the engine was upside down. The wheels were still turning, but the car was flat as a flitter. I mean, the roof was smashed all the way down to the seat. And I was looking at it, all the windows were broken out, and I'm standing there in the drizzling rain without a scratch on me. I had glass in my shirt, glass in my underwear, glass in my socks. I had glass everywhere, but I had no cuts, no bruises, nothing broken. I'm just standing there shivering in the rain. And people stopped and came running over, wanting to know where the dead guy was. And I said, "There's no dead guy." "Well, where's the driver?" And I said, "I'm the driver." And they look at me like, "No, you couldn't have been driving this. There's nothing wrong with you." And but to make a long story short, God showed me great mercy that day. I never made it to Oral Roberts University as a student. I went, my mom and dad came and got me. They were there by noon or shortly after noon, and picked me up at the local police station. Daddy had a spare tire in one hand, and he had a tow chain in the other hand. And he said, "Let's go get the car." And I said, "Well, I don't know if that's going to work." But he insisted, so we went down to where they had towed the car into this wrecking yard. And they had it inside this big barn. And when they opened the doors of the barn, Daddy dropped the tire and dropped the chain in total shock because the car was flattened. And he cried. He realized the magnitude of the miracle that had taken place. And so all the way home that day, and we're still Good Friday, all the way home that day, there was quiet in the car. And I could tell that my parents were deeply moved and deeply grateful to the Lord, because it could have been so much worse. Daddy took that, got the insurance off of that car and actually made a profit on it. Even though it was totaled out, he had bought it at a low enough rate and insured it, and the insurance paid more than he paid for it, so he made money on the wrecked car. But the big miracle there was how God took care of me, and in doing so, he took care of them too. And so these are just two of the many evidences and proofs that God was in my life, protecting me and watching over me. And I just wanted to share those. Maybe I'll share some of the others in another video, but this one's gone over 13 minutes, and so I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll talk to you again. But thank God for his everlasting mercy that are new every morning. Amen.